This is an algebra video looking at factorising quadratics. We're going to factorise quadratics using the guide number method. Let's look at our first example. We want to factorise the quadratic x squared plus 8x plus 7. I'm going to start by noting that the coefficient of x squared is 1. So how do we get our guide number? We multiply the coefficient of x squared by the constant at the end. And for the time being, we'll just ignore signs. 1 by 7 gives us 7. Now we need to factorise this guide number. The factors of 7 are just 1 by 7. I can quite clearly see that 1 plus 7 makes 8, which is the coefficient of x. And I'm going to split up this 8x term so that instead of 8x, I have 1x and 7x. Notice that 1x plus 7x makes the 8x in the original line. Now I'm going to use factors by grouping to factorise the first two terms and the last two terms of this expression. So first of all, looking at x squared plus 1x, I can factorise an x out of both of these terms, and I put x plus 1 in the bracket. Now looking at my last two terms, plus 7x plus 7, I can factorise a 7 out of both of these terms. I must make sure to include the sign. And in the bracket, I'll have x plus 1. It's really, really important that both the first bracket and the last bracket should be identical. And now my last step is to put the terms that I've factorised out, in this case the x and the plus 7, into their own bracket, and I write the repeating bracket once. So when I factorise x squared plus 8x plus 7, my result is x plus 7 by x plus 1. Let's look at a second example. This time I want to factorise x squared plus 6x plus 8. Remember, the coefficient of x squared in this case is 1. I'll start by getting my guide number by multiplying 1 by 8. And now I want to get the factors of 8. When I factorise 8, I can get 1 by 8, but that's not the only option. I could also say 2 by 4. Quite often there'll be multiple ways in which you can factorise your guide number. Now we must choose a pair of factors to use in our factorisation. To make the decision about which pair of factors to look at, I must look at the middle term of my quadratic. So I've got this plus 6x here. So how could I make plus 6? Well, I can't do it with 1 and 8, but I could do it with 2 and 4. So this is the pair of factors that I'm going to use. So now I've written down x squared plus 2x plus 4x plus 8. So I've split the 6x up into 2x and 4x. And the 2 and the 4 were decided by the way that I factorised 8 from the guide number. Now I'm going to factorise. So looking at my first two terms, what can I factorise from them? I can factorise x out of both of these terms. What do you think should go in the bracket? It should be x plus 2. I also need to factorise plus 4x plus 8. What can I factorise out of both of these terms? I can factorise out plus 4. What do you think should go in the bracket? It's x plus 2. And notice that both of the brackets are identical. Now I need to write the final line of my factorisation. How do you think this should look? It should be x plus 4 by x plus 2. Here's example 3. I want to factorise 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. The first thing I'll need to do is get the guide number. In this case, I'll get it by multiplying which two numbers together? I'll multiply by the 2 by the 3 to get 6. And now I need to factorise the 6. What pairs of factors are possible? I could get 1 by 6, or I could get 2 by 3. So I need to make a decision about which is the best set of factors to use, and I'll make that decision by looking at the middle term in my quadratic. So I'm looking at that 7x. So I think, which of these pairs could I use to make 7? Well, it's clearly the 1 and the 6, because 1 and 6 makes 7. So I'm going to split the 7x now up into 1x and 6x. So my quadratic now looks like this: 2x squared plus 1x plus 6x plus 3. And now, just like before, I must factorise the first two terms and the last two terms. So looking at the first two terms, what do they have in common? What could I factorise out? I could factorise an x out of both of them. And what should go in the bracket? bracket should contain 2x plus 1. Now I need to factorise the last two terms. So 6x and 3, what will factorise out of both of those? So 3 will factorise out of both of these terms. And what should go in the bracket? Well, when I factorise 3 out of 6x and 3, I'm left with 2x plus 1 in the bracket. And again, notice that both of these brackets are the same. Just be careful. Don't just automatically write in the same thing. Be sure to think about it and check that it actually works for those last two terms. And then what should my last line look like? Well, my solution at the end should be x plus 3 by 2x plus 1. And just a note about signs in relation to these first three examples. If we look back through these three examples, I can see that in the original question, every term is positive in each of the three cases. And we can see that in our solutions, our signs are all positive as well. In the next set of examples, we'll need to pay a bit more attention to the signs, and they will be important in getting the answer correct. So here we have a question to factorise a quadratic x squared minus 7x plus 10. So we'll start by getting the guide number. And again, just note the coefficient of x squared is 1. I'll multiply this by the constant to get my guide number. So in this case, my guide number is 10. Now I want to get the factors of that guide number. What should they be? Well, I've got two options. I can say 1 by 10 or 2 by 5. But remember that I want to try and make the middle term in my quadratic with them. So this time that's a minus 7x. So I can't make a minus 7 with 1 and 10, but I could do it with 2 and 5. So how should my quadratic look now when I split up that middle term minus 7x? It should be x squared minus 2x minus 5x plus 10. Notice that minus 2 minus 5 makes minus 7. Sometimes at this stage, if you're a little bit hesitant about those kind of calculations, it's a good plan to have your calculator to hand so you can type in minus 2 minus 5 and confirm that it makes the correct value here, minus 7. And now I want to go ahead and factorise as normal. So when I factorise x squared minus 2x, what can I factorise out? I can factorise out x. What should go in the bracket? X minus 2 goes in the bracket. And now I'll factorise minus 5x plus 10. Now at this point, I want to just be aware that I want to try and get x minus 2 in my second bracket over here. So what do I think I should factorise out of these two terms to get that result? I should factorise out minus 5. And just note that minus 5 by x is the minus 5x on the previous line. And minus 5 times minus 2 is this plus 10 that I have on the previous line. And now we'll proceed to the last line of the factorisation. How should that look? X minus 5 times x minus 2 is the final line of this question. That's my solution. Here's example 5. Factorise x squared plus 8x minus 20. Again, I'm going to put a 1 in front of the x squared, that's its coefficient, and I'll get the guide number by multiplying 1 by 20. Notice that even though it's a negative 20, I'm not really paying any attention to the sign at this point. That'll come in later. So my guide number is 1 by 20, which is 20, and now I have to factorise that. Now there are several options for the factors of 20, so just take a moment to note all of them. So I've got 3 pairs of factors that I can choose from. I've got 1 by 20, 2 by 10, 4 by 5. Now, which choice should I make? Okay, so I want to make this plus 8 in the middle. Can I get that from 1 and 20? No. Can I get it from 2 and 10? Well, 2 and 10 makes 12, but if I was to allow myself to subtract, then I would be able to get 8, because to make plus 8, I can use 10 minus 2. And I can't get 8 out of 4 and 5, whether I add or subtract, so it looks like 10 and 2 are the options. When writing out my quadratic now, I just need to be careful to use the correct signs. So I'll obviously start with x squared, and now what can I do with 2 and 10 to make plus 8, and it's just important there, just be really aware it's a plus 8. So if I say plus 10 minus 2, that gives me plus 8. And again, like I said before, if you're a little bit dubious about this, have the calculator to hand. You can type in the coefficients plus 10 minus 2, it'll give you the plus 8, and you'll know that you're correct. If you decided instead to use minus 10 and plus 2, well then the calculator would alert you to the fact that that would be negative 8, and I don't want a negative, I don't want a minus sign here in front of my 8, so that wouldn't be correct. Now I'll go on to factorise as normal. So when I factorise x squared plus 10x, what can I factorise out of both of these terms? I can factorise out x, and what should go into the bracket? So in this bracket I should have x plus 10. Now I need to factorise minus 2x minus 20, and in the back of my head I'm thinking, okay, whatever I factorise out, I need to end up with x plus 10 in a bracket at the end here. So what do you think I could factorise out of these two terms to end up with that result? Well, I can factorise out minus 2, and that's going to leave me with x plus 10 in that bracket. It's probably not a bad idea here, just do a quick check. Minus 2 by x is minus 2x, minus 2 by plus 10 is minus 20. What do you think the last line of this question should look like? My final line is x minus 2 times x plus 10, and that's what I get when I factorise this quadratic. Example 6, we want to factorise 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. Let's get our guide number. So we'll multiply 2 by 5, and that will give us 10. I have a couple of options for the factors of 10, and they are 1 by 10 and 2 by 5. I look back to my quadratic and notice the middle term was minus 9x. So how can I get minus 9 from these factors of 10? Well, 2 and 5, I don't think I can manage it. Whether I add them, I'd get 7. If I subtract them, I'd get 3 or minus 3. It's not going to happen. What about the 1 and the 10? Well, if I add them, I'm getting 11. But if I subtract, I can get minus 9. Now, just be careful in this case. Which one do you think should be plus and which one do you think should be minus? And like I said before, if you're a little bit uncertain, just have the calculator to hand and type in the options that you think might be correct and see if they give you a minus 9. Okay, so I want minus 9, so I'm going to say 1x minus 10x. And just at this point to note that you could write these the other way around as well. You could say 2x squared minus 10x plus 1x minus 5. You'll get the same answer both ways. So the order you write them down doesn't matter, but what does matter is that you have the correct sign with the correct number. Now I want to factorise this part of my quadratic. What can I factorise from these first two terms? I can factorise out x, and what should remain in the bracket? So the bracket should hold 2x plus 1. And again, now I want to factorise these last two terms. And I just want to be aware in the back of my head that I want to end up with a bracket of 2x plus 1 here at the end. So what could I factorise out of these two terms to get 2x plus 1? Well, I can factorise out negative 5. That'll give me 2x plus 1. And I can just double check if I'm not 100% certain if I'm right or not. Minus 5 by 2x is minus 10x. Minus 5 by 1 is minus 5. So I know I'm definitely correct. And now how should my final line look? Well, the final line is x minus 5 times 2x plus 1. So this is my last example. And the reason that I'm including it is that it's one that people get wrong really frequently. It's an easy one to make mistakes in. So we'll talk through it and we'll do the solution and we'll just talk about why we're making the choices that we're making as we do the solution out. Okay, so I first of all want to get my guide number. So that's fine. I'll just use the 1 and the 6, and 1 by 6 will give me 6. And when I factorise this, I've got a couple of options, and I can get 1 by 6 or I can get 2 by 3. And now this is where the trouble can kind of begin, because you could look at these and say, well, 2 and 3, I can make 5. So a lot of people would use the 2 and the 3 here as their choice of factors, but actually that's incorrect. The reason it's incorrect is that I have a negative here at the end. Any time that I have a negative in a quadratic at the end, it means the signs of the numbers here must be different to make the middle term. So what I mean by this is that if I've got a minus at the end, I can't say plus 2 plus 3 makes 5. Equally, I couldn't have minus 2 minus 3. I need the signs to be different. Now, that's why 1 and 6 will work, because I can make plus 5 with different signs on these. I can use a positive 6 and a negative 1. So keep an eye for this. If there's ever a negative at the end of your quadratic, then the values that you choose from your factors over here will need to use different signs to make the middle term. So as a result, I'm going to choose that 1 and 6. So how is my quadratic going to look now? Well, the 5x, which of course is a plus 5x, is going to get split up into plus 6x minus 1x. Again, notice I've got different signs because of that minus at the end of my quadratic. And let's just double check to confirm for ourselves that it makes the plus 5. Plus 6 minus 1 is plus 5. So now I'm going to factorise the first two terms in the quadratic. So what can I factorise out of these two terms? I can factorise out x, and what should go in the bracket? I should have x plus 6 in the bracket. Now I'll factorise the terms at the end. So minus 1x minus 6. So what could I factorise out of both of these? Remembering that I want to get x plus 6 in my bracket at the end. Well, I can factorise minus 1 out of both of these. And my final line then should be x minus 1 by x plus 6.